See, we're already in global government. And there are other little agreements. In the 1980s, billions of dollars was put in a secretive fund with a secret court, the Vaccine Damage Fund. You see, other drugs supposedly can be sued. If fen-phen makes you, have heart valve disintegration, well, you can then, sue them. But see, not the vaccine makers. And back when they did that, there were 15 or 20 they were trying to push. Now it's hundreds they want to push on the people of the planet. And they're given a secret court, and then taxpayer money secretly pays out all the dead and dying. The inserts, though, still admit that they can kill you or cause neurological disorders or countless other problems. And now this year they've got bills introduced to the Congress to even get rid of the inserts with vaccines, you see. Just like they don't want labeling on GMO. Now, the lady we've got on with us till about 45 after, and I really appreciate her coming on, is Dr. Toni Bark. And I really appreciate her coming on. Disease-reversal.com is her website. She is a prestigious medical doctor, testified before Congress, the Senate, and I'd already knew who she was, read some of her articles over the years, but I was glad we were able to get in contact with her because she's also the medical doctor for the founder of Smashing Pumpkins and a big listener of the show and a great mind when it comes to deciphering what's happening. Of course, Billy Corgan, who was here with us in studio a few weeks ago. And she received her medical doctorate from Rush University in '86 for studying psychology, University of Illinois and University of London. She immediately took the position of director of pediatric emergency room at Michelle Reese Hospital in Chicago. So, boy, she's seen it all. After 2 years, she began her studies in alternative medicine practices, such as nutrition and classical homeopathy, all while keeping her hands in emergency and urgent care medical work, as well as starting her private practice in '93. 2010, Dr. Bark also began a master's program in healthcare emergency medicine at Boston University, where she focused on vaccine safety, efficacy, and ethics issues. She worked as an adjunct professor at the Boston Graduate Program, teaching and the effects of disaster on psychology. Dr. Bark also co-produced the documentary, bought the feature in the documentary Silent Epidemic, Vaccine Wars, and Food Choices. She is an alternative and active in legislative issues and has given testimony for Senate Health Committee, disease-reversal.com. And Dr. Bark, thank you so much for coming on with us. You heard me kind of set the table there for folks that just tuned in. Some of the news, we're going to break in 5 minutes, but first off, thank you for coming on with us. But what is front and center for you today with all the changes that are happening?
Well, I do see the tide turning somewhat. Yesterday, I was an expert witness in a Midwestern state in family court. This is something that I've done many times. This is regarding vaccine custody issues. I've done it in Australia as well. I've worked on cases in Canada, and I have a case in the vaccine court itself right now as well. But I do feel that the tide is turning. I mean, the judge yesterday was fascinated with hearing what I had to say about the lack of vaccine safety, about the court, and the opposing physician was unaware of the vaccine court, unaware of VAERS reporting, was not aware of how to recognize a vaccine damage. And this is exactly what we see, is that while the government set up this system in '86, and it was 14 shots we were pushing at that time, 14. We are up to, by the age of 5, we are up to, 49 doses in some states. In some states, it's 63. In some states, it's more if they push an annual flu shot or the nasal inhalant for under 6 years of age. And then in some states, it's even more because we're seeing Gardasil, while it's not on any state mandate other than Rhode Island, it is being pushed heavily at the doctor's office. So I see more bills coming down the road. We know there's something called Healthy People 2020, which is for adults, and it's tied to the Department of Transportation. That's really friggin' scary. That means, Mr. Jones, we don't know that you've been vaccinated in the last 10 years. You can't get on this flight. You need to step out of the line and go get MMR, OPV, IPV, DPT.
That's right.
God knows what else. That's what's going on.
As dystopic a face I try to put on things, I get an expert like you on, Dr. Bark, and then I start realizing all the horrible stuff I forgot to say. They want this as a right to travel, to supposedly medicalize us. And this is a whole military-industrial big pharma complex that's been caught in thousands of, in many cases, lethal secret testing on the general public. Why would we trust anything that big pharmaceutical companies like Bayer, who for a decade knowingly had HIV and hepatitis A, B, and C in their factor VIII blood product, and in their own court cases, mainstream news, even NBC News came out and said, screw it, keep selling it, who cares if we kill people? I mean, you talk about an arrogant group of evil folks.
Congress allowed them. So Congress passed, it was illegal for them to sell that factor VIII, the HIV tainted factor VIII in the States, but Congress passed something at the 11th hour, literally at the 11th hour. It was like midnight on a Christmas Eve. And
Canada.
Yeah, and they were allowed to sell it to Spain, Portugal, and I believe France or Japan. And then about 15,000 people developed HIV from the tainted factor VIII, and there were lawsuits. But, it's the price of doing business. I mean, the amount they had to pay out is nothing compared to what they made on.
And let's be clear, the executive's minutes have been public from the criminal trials in France and Australia and other areas. It came out that they knew it had HIV and hepatitis.
Absolutely.
Was a death sentence to basically anyone that took it with the HIV, and they did it. Folks, these are sick people. Please continue, doctor.
Yeah, so I mean, that's one example. There's many examples like the SV40 tainted polio vaccines.
Cancer virus.
Exactly. And that was the 40th simian virus. We don't even talk about the other 39. But, the government knew that they were aware that SV40 was contaminating that polio vaccine. And what they said to I believe it was Qatar that was first making it, and then a few other companies, was that, we'll allow you to sell off this lot. You've got a few more years to sell this off. And then we want you to start over. Well, there's actually, so first of all, that's egregious and nefarious. And then there's evidence that it was in tainting the vaccines as late as 1997.
Wow. Well, you've done so much amazing work. When you testify to Congress or the Senate, I know you try to crystallize the info down, but we've got the CDC documents, as you know, from 2000, where the head of the CDC is like, I'm not going to let my grandkids have this. What are we going to do? We got to cover this up. But they never fixed it. It's only gotten worse. Now there's more vaccines they want to take. I mean, as autism goes from, 1 in 30,000 to 1 in 58, they're talking about 1 in 3 within a decade. There's got to be a point where they know the epidemic's going to be so bad that they're going to end up getting brought down, or are they just kicking the can down the road, doctor?
No, I mean, if you think about it, the healthcare system, the whole system in the United States is the largest growing business. It's the largest growing field in the whole world. I mean, exponential, between CVS's on every corner, between hospitals growing and new medical centers and urgent cares everywhere. This is an exploding field. And so they see it as a win-win. I mean, if more people are sick, if we can manage to not kill people, but just really damage them so they have chronic illness, then the drug companies make a lot of money, the hospitals make a lot of money. These nonprofit, quote unquote, hospitals, they get away with so much bullshit. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's worse than the for-profits because they get federal tax money. They sell a can of Coke for $10, only get $1 from insurance. So then they get federal funding for the $9, or, an aspirin for $100, or a pap smear for $300, and the insurance company only pays $14. And then the rest, the federal government gives them.
So it's just like the military-industrial complex, $700 billion a year here alone. Of course they're funding Al-Qaeda. Of course they're funding terror groups, because when the terror groups then attack, they then have an excuse to go into those countries, and half the time don't even target the actual group. They'll target somebody totally innocent, like the Iraqi people.
Well, so this is a good example. So yesterday or the day before, yesterday I was testifying all day. So I was driving and testifying. But the day before, I was posting something, and I saw somebody was talking about how great carbs, and he studies cardiovascular disease, and he's saying the benefit of eating a carb diet. And I talked about ketogenic diets, that I put a lot of my patients into ketosis. It reverses cancer, it reverses diabetes, it reverses heart disease, even Alzheimer's. And he immediately attacked me and said, patients can die. It's deadly dangerous. I mean, this is coming out the same day that, the whole industrial complex is admitting that pharmaceuticals is the third leading cause of death. And I, by the way, think it's probably second or first leading cause of death. And we can talk about that. But, to say that it's dangerous, deadly dangerous to go into ketosis.
This is one of the most out of control, mass killing industries ever. It's like Satan telling you if you read a Playboy, you might become Satan. I mean, it's totally insane. It's like Hitler saying, don't be mean to the Jews. In fact, get into that, doctor. Let's talk about the numbers because we find the same thing. It looks like medical neglect, medical problems, mistakes and drugs are probably together the #1 cause of death.
Well, I see it a little differently. Those are very high numbers that cause death. But actually, if you really think about it, I'll see a breast cancer patient, right? And then I take the history because I spend 2 hours with all my patients. And the history could be that they were on rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics. Rounds of antibiotics. So, we know that when you're on a lot of antibiotics, it alters your bowel flora. It also reduces your it increases intrahepatic circulation of hormones without degrading them and detoxifying them. So it's possible that patient would have never had breast cancer if they weren't thrown antibiotics for every friggin' sinus complaint, every friggin' cold. So it's worse than that. And then look at the vaccines that can possibly be contaminated with retroviruses. We know that. I mean, we know that there's contamination, prions, retroviruses, passages. They put the vaccines through passages through these cells and these longevity cell lines. And at certain passages, they're carcinogenic, they're oncogenic. So how do we know that a polio vaccine that somebody got when in the 60s when they were a child, and now they're eating glyphosate, on their food, that the combination is not increasing their risk for cancer, especially then if they've had antibiotics thrown at them. So a lot of times when you hear patients died from complications of their disease, I believe that they actually died from the medications.
Absolutely, doctor, stay right there. I've got to say, I am so impressed with you because I've read so much literature, mainline studies. This stuff's really hidden out there, but I've never heard somebody move as fast as you and bring up so many key things. So hopefully, maybe you stay the whole hour if you can, because I want to get more into this with you and obviously have you back a lot. But Dr. Toni Bark is our guest, disease-reversal.com. Back up a little bit.
Sure.
And get into the viruses, the prions, folks. That's what is connected to Alzheimer's and other things that we know are in the vaccines. You got into immortal cell lines. This is all mainline science, but no one even knows this. Where they're getting these vaccines from is like these zombie cell lines, and just drill into then where you think this is really all going, because you're absolutely right. The average doctor isn't evil.
No.
But they're a priest of a cult that's run by the Rockefellers on record that wants you sick to basically take all your money from your whole life into their system and to control it, because they don't just want the money, they print the money. They don't want you having your own discretionary income to build anything that ever competes with them. It's all about competition being a sin, a total final takeover. So please continue.
Well, okay. So I trained in pediatrics and rehab. I ran a peds emergency room, right? And I knew that many kids reacted very badly to vaccines. That was clear. But when I trained, we didn't vaccinate pregnant women. We didn't vaccinate newborns that were premature or sick. We didn't even vaccinate women who were thinking of getting pregnant. And again, it was 14 shots by the age of 5. That was the 80s before this court. So things were, a vaccine could be risky, but I was actually told, we'll never mandate chickenpox vaccine because with every vaccine comes a risk of serious injury, and it's not worth it for chickenpox, right? Well, that's all, that's gone now. All that's gone. So as soon as they lost liability, things went crazy. But what I didn't know until I started doing my master's in 2010 was that, these policies are based on nothing but lobbyists. The lobbyists write these bills. Clearly. And then we've got regulatory capture to the nth degree. I mean, the committees at the CDC, at the FDA are 100%, with one exception of the consumer rep, are people who work for the main manufacturers of the vaccines. The CDC, actually, there is something called FACA, which is Federal Advisory Committee Act, which says you can't have undue conflict of interest, financial or otherwise, with the industry you're regulating. And the CDC on their website says, as a matter of policy, they waive that for people on the vaccine committees because they want specialists. So that's a problem right there. But when I was writing my papers I interviewed people that were the consumer reps at the time or had been consumer reps at the ASA committee, at the HHS flu vaccine committee, at the VRBAC committee. And they all told me, especially the one at the VRBAC committee, that they're very aware that there's contamination. And if you go on to websites like Virusist, which is a journal for people in the industry, they'll say, they'll advertise counters, new counters that, can test better sensitivity for prions in the bovine serum. These are the kind of ads. So I started going on to Virusist and looking at the ads for the counters.
And you're talking about inside baseball, inside the big plants, what they're up to. But again, this is all, from my research, a cover story, even for the people working in the plants and the engineers and chemists and virologists, because there's a larger program above it, just like our phones are full of hack tech and things for the whole shadow government that's now admitted. Vaccines are really overall just the cover for a larger binary weapons program.
I mean, it very well could be. All I know is the facts that I know.
Is that it is contaminated and they're covering it up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's very clear. And I don't believe that it started out with that intention. I really don't believe that. I think if you read The Virus and the Vaccine, it's a book on the race to develop between Salk and Sabin and the government to develop the polio vaccine. But bring it back to that.
Sure, and the monkey kidneys had the cancer virus. I get it.
Exactly.
But they're still giving stuff off the same batch. They're still having to recall it today because of it.
Absolutely. So we have a lot. Yeah, it's a great, that's such a great book. There's so many really good books out there.
But then meanwhile, you have all this knowledge. All these other great people have the knowledge. It's a fact. We raise it. Mainstream media goes, there was never a cancer virus. There's no secret fund. None of it. There's no side effects. Safe and effective. Safe and effective. It's the law. Take the shots when there is no law. But now they're trying to make laws. We're going to talk about forced inoculation and intimidation and Colorado wanting to make you be in databases when we come back with our amazing guest. Boy, you can tell she's going to be here a lot if she'll join us. What an informed, dynamic lady. Disease-reversal.com. Dr. Toni Bark, amazing lady. I'm so glad that Billy Corgan said that I should get her on. Thank you, Billy. We'll be back straight ahead. Stay with us. There are interests in this world that have taken over. The military-industrial complex is just one of them. Eisenhower warned of a technological, scientific elite overlording all of that in his 1961 farewell address. And boy, we're living under it now. They are coming out with a big push worldwide for forced inoculations, or to have states like California pass laws to say your 11-year-old can have an age of consent, to say they want vaccines and the government can give them money. All I know is the vaccinated kids I know are just so unhealthy. Mine are unvaccinated completely or super healthy by the grace of God. People say, wow, your kids, they're like electric. They're so smart. They're so happy. They're so healthy. What happened? And I go, no vaccines. But other kids they run into make fun of them and say, you're going to get us sick. You haven't had your vaccines. I thought if you had yours, you were protected, right? So then how is it that we need to be? My dad's a physician, and almost every doctor he knows doesn't take the vaccines. Their kids don't because they see the reactions. The nurses at the hospital, all three of my kids tried to pressure, and they said, we don't give ours either, but yeah, we see it. We've had nurses on to the heads of ERs and the heads of preemie floors. And they come in, the bioethics board, and says, vaccinate them. 6-month-old baby. And they go, but they have breathing problems and die. And they say, do it. So they get the paddles ready and they get the defibrillators and then they give them the shots and watch which ones start dying. And they save them. They give the shots and then they save them. But some die. We've had them on whistleblowers. It's been in the news. And then it came out in newspapers after we had them on. Yeah. See, used to you knew don't give them to preemies. Don't give a pregnant woman a shot. You give them a shot, boom, that baby miscarriage right there on the spot. 6 months old, doesn't matter. So, but they wanted to be able to say vaccines are totally, so they went 5 years ago, no, give pregnant women 2 shots. Even though the insert says don't do it. It's just a doubling down and in your face. Oh, you're going to resist us? We're going to push even more. Yeah, there it is. Hospital. Vaccine is causing babies to stop breathing. See the interview, see the video, Infowars.com. Get that out to every pregnant woman you know. Get it out to the hospitals. Cause a public debate. We can override the globalists, and that's what's happening. Whether you love Trump or hate him, he's an example of overriding them and all their lies and all their propaganda. We're going to go back to the doctor here in a moment. First off, we have the highest quality non-GMO storable foods out there at the lowest price, powered by My Patriot Supply. I've been selling storable foods for years. It's always good to have for emergencies. Plus, as food prices go up, you can always eat your food and save money on inflation. But with all the wars they're starting and the globalism and the elites getting bunkers and storable foods and local police departments getting storable foods, now is the time. And folks pick up the political climate. I've never seen people take advantage of a sale like this, and that's a win-win. But it's kind of sad to see that we are in so much trouble. People get it. I wish this wasn't the case. I wish I wasn't having to get more storable food. I'm even stockpiling it here at the office now. A lot of medical supplies, you name it, just in case things unravel, because that's what they're getting ready for. I hope that's not the case. Infowarsstore.com or InfowarsSelect.com takes you right to the storable foods area, 30 to 40% off, and it will end Sunday. I will not extend it. That'll be a week. We've extended it this Sunday. And it's the full spectrum of My Patriot Supply, just private label by us, and 10% off all other survival items, high quality, crank-powered and solar-powered shortwave radios, non-GMO heirloom seeds, a giant spectrum of 14 different brands there. G-Shock watches, super high-quality water filtration systems. TheraSafe in case a reactor melts down. Strategic Relocation, the book and the film, all discounted. All nutraceuticals, vitamin B12, highest quality. Methylcobalamin organic that we produced. The Winter Sun, vitamin D3 organic, totally absorbable, vegan, extremely absorbable. Brain Force, DNA Force, Anthroplex. All of it. Try them out for yourself. Survival Shield X2, Colloidal Silver, Silver Bullet. All of them 10% off the already big discounts that are there, and free shipping on orders $50 or more, and 10% off additionally if you sign up for auto ship. You take all the different discounts that are there. We're talking about as high as 70% discounts where we lose money on some items. But we're doing it, ladies and gentlemen, because, again, it's about having lost leaders and getting folks in the door to try some of these products to become repeat customers and then be able to self-fund their operation, which I'm very thankful to you for. So it's a win-win as we fight back against medical tyranny, the globalist takeover, all these wars they're starting, how they're flooding us with uncompatible, radical jihadists. I mean, you can see the destabilization program because the managers that handle the crises get more power and more control in this fascist crony capitalist system with those type of programs. So again, take advantage of those specials, the 30 to 40% off, depending on which food package it is. 30 is the lowest discount. Will end Sunday at InfoWarsStore.com. You can also call to ask any questions, 888-253-3139. Now, going back to our guest, I'm going to try to give you the floor now in the next 22 minutes that we have left in the broadcast here. Dr. Toni Bark, disease-reversal.com. And again, she's a medical doctor, and she is Billy Corgan's personal physician. He said, this lady knows more than anybody I know. And when I looked her up, I said, oh, I've seen her on C-SPAN. I've seen her. I know. I've seen her website. She's a really smart lady. Yeah, let's get her on. But wow, blowing us away, breaking down vaccines. We were getting to forced inoculation. We were getting to having to get shots to get on a plane or to get your driver's license. Bill Clinton signed an executive order. They never implemented it, but they started it, the ball rolling back in 1997. It's in my first film, America Destroyed by Design, to take urine and blood to get a driver's license. Now, D.C. started a few years ago, free driver's license if you give them a blood sample. So it's begun. Let's get into how they're trying to force us to have the government and corporations make us put things in our body. The final frontier, and then we have convulsions and die. A secret tribunal, if we jump through 10 years of hoops, might give $500,000 of taxpayer money quietly to our families. Doctor?
Well, okay. So first of all of the health sciences have been completely corrupted. But as far as I'm concerned, the vaccine issue is the worst one because that's the only time we see mandates for public school for certain jobs. So that's why it's the most egregious in my mind. But in my film, in Bought, one of the whistleblowers I interviewed was a state fraud investigator who was fired for investigating state fraud because it had to do with pharma. And he was told, pharma pays both sides of the aisle, back off of this. And he didn't. So he was fired. Of course, many, many years later, about a decade later, it got settled. He got a lot of money from the EEOC just from being fired. And then, of course, the whole thing was settled for about $5 billion. But there was an organization, a ring of 7 states where the directors of mental health for those states were trying to implement TMAP, which was it was a test that you would implement to kids in junior high, and it would point out the risk of kids who were maybe bipolar, or difficult, had behavior issues. And it was in order to push drugs on kids. And they were pushing drugs that were off label, that weren't even approved for kids. I mean, this was the whole goal.
Sure, and Bush pushed that as the new freedom initiative nationwide.
Yes, that was Bush pushing that. Exactly. I mean, it's so frightening that, so they start with vaccines. And by the way, I recently ran into a priest high up in the Catholic Church internationally who told me that he knows what's going on, that he has seen many people vaccinated at gunpoint in third world countries.
Oh, yeah.
And that he knows that if you're high up in the Vatican, the WHO is a problem. I mean, he was aware of what was going on in Kenya. I mean, in Ghana, I think it was.
Oh,
Ghana.
yeah, the Africans used to love the white witch doctors 100 years ago that shut up because they knew they had good medicine.
Right.
For the last 50 years, they run. I mean, this is in the news because they know. Because they come to a village, find pregnant, give shot, my baby die, everyone. And then, I mean, these people have been interviewed all over the world. They just are killing them.
Well, look what happened in Africa with the swine flu shot. So in Europe and in Australia, they recognize that some kids get narcolepsy from that shot, right? And they got paid out. But we had an epidemic of nodding disease in Africa.
Oh.
Nodding. Yeah, interesting, right? And if you look at where it was where that swine flu shot was.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You're just too incredible. Hey, bring up all these points I forgot about. Remember in 96 and again a few years ago, they officially got caught, the UN adding a hormone to the tetanus shot to cause second trimester miscarriages?
That was in the Philippines, and it was the late 90s. It was HCG, and that's what was going on in Kenya last year, and the Catholic doctors and the Catholic bishops pointed it out. So it happened in the Philippines in the late 90s, and it happened again in Kenya. So it's HCG, which is a hormone that your placenta makes when you're pregnant. And so if you have antibodies to it, every time you're pregnant, you're going to attack your own placenta.
And what was so sick, you're the doctor, but I remember reading an article, it wasn't just that it would kill the baby, it would cause autoimmune disease in the women's uteruses where your body attacks itself. And if they were doing this in the 90s and the UN got caught, they said it was an accident that got added. But it turned out they had over 100 makers around the world all accidentally adding this.
Well, I didn't know how many makers, but I did know it happened in the Philippines, and it was called out, and I think, again, by the Catholic.
It was all over the country, all over the world, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if you know this one. This is also brilliant because people think Tuskegee was so long ago. But when I was speaking at rallies in Sacramento last year, I brought up that in early 1990s, the CDC, along with Kaiser Permanente, which is huge in California, was conducting experiments on infant inner city Black and Hispanic kids under the 18 months of age in order to see if they could overwhelm maternal fetal antibodies. And what were they doing? They were giving an experimental measles shot at 10 to 500 times the dose. Now,
wow.
The UN, the CDC was doing this with Johns Hopkins.
No, you just blew me away. You just told me something I didn't know. Now I'm impressed. I was aware of secret vaccine and pesticide testing on inner city youth, mainly Black, but that's because no one would stand up for them, but they did to other groups as well, including killing children with pesticides. I'm sorry. It's just so insane. Look, you found the LA Times. Wow.
Right.
CDC says it messed up. It erred in measles study. Whoa.
Yeah, it was criminal, okay? And it wasn't just there in LA. The CDC at the same time simultaneously was doing it with Johns Hopkins in West Africa and Haiti. And there were deaths. And they had to stop it because of the deaths. But listen to this. So we've got now a cohort of kids who are in their late 20s who were given measles shots at 10 to 500 times the dose. And nobody's following up on them because they were probably given $100 in a pizza party.
It's worse, though. I just thought of this. It's the measles vaccine that we find the antibodies in the guts of mostly autistic children. Oh, my God. And then I keep wondering, why does fluoride hit Blacks double bad or vaccines? But then I see some of the studies that they're actually giving more vaccines or special vaccines to the Blacks that are even worse. Then I learn in mainstream news that the rich and the elites, quote, get the clean vaccines. I bet this rabbit hole goes a lot deeper. I'm sorry, doctor. I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
Well, okay. So people, when I said this at one of the rallies, people were going crazy because nobody had heard of this. It was a little article in the LA Times, like, oh, no big deal. We aired. How do you air? By not disclosing it's an experiment, by not letting parents know you're giving 10 to 500 times the recommended dose of a new experimental vaccine. I mean, that's not an error. That is criminal behavior. And it was one article in the LA Times, and I think there was one article somewhere out east, and that was it. And then it was dropped. I mean, this is unbelievable. Can you imagine? It was kind of like when Baxter had the flu shot, and it had H1N1 or H1N5 in it.
And all the homeless died.
Well, no, this was the one that got to the Ukraine, and they tested it on ferrets, and so they were all dying. And somebody at the Ukraine at the testing station caught it. But Baxter said it was a mistake and didn't want to disclose.
I remember that when it killed all the ferrets, but look at this one in the Telegraph. Homeless die after bird flu vaccine trial in Poland, and they said it usually only kills a couple people out of 30, but this one killed most of them.
I mean, it is... So it's really crazy, but I'll tell you that most doctors, this is a religious belief, you know? I mean, I was guilty too. I was inculcated.
No, I know. Doctors will tell you there's no problems, that's made up. And I'm like, I have 500 mainstream news articles and the insert saying it. And they go, no, you don't.
Yeah, it's really akin to a religious belief in the system. You know, you believe that the CDC tells you good information. Most doctors are kind of not wow. aware of how the world works in terms of how business works, right? They're not business minded in general. And so they don't understand, just like with mainstream media. I mean, 70% of their advertising money in a non-election year is pharma. You're going to bite the hand that feeds you? I don't think so. And the CDC has a revolving door. You know, it's kind of like with the FDA whistleblower who exposed the Vioxx issue. He said that he was taken aside and said, who do you think you work for? You work for the people or you work for the industry? You work for the industry. That's what's going on.
I tell you, I get somebody like you on, because I read hundreds of news articles a day. You start reminding me of stuff I read years ago, and we pull it up. And
right.
then then you bring up stuff that I didn't even know about. And I'm just wondering, I wonder what else has never come out. I mean, I'd imagine it's probably 10 times what we know, Doctor.
Oh, you know, it's a rabbit hole. This is what when I spoke in Rhode Island, when the Department of Public Health, which was allowed to make legislation without legislators' approval, and mandated Gardasil for all 6th graders, boys and girls, in the fall. I was immediately flown out with Diane Harper, who was one of the key architects of that vaccine and consulted for Merck. And it's unbelievable because most doctors are just unaware. And what I think is that it's a rabbit hole. So the doctors that came heard it and got incensed, not at me, at the system. You know, they're like, wow, I had no idea. And I understand, like, they start falling down that rabbit hole.
So that's the good news, is this is coming out, because I had a pediatrician, one of the biggest pediatricians in Austin about 5 years ago, grab me and go, listen, I volunteer for free clinics, you know, and he goes, they were giving the old SV40 to the kids in East Austin. I can't believe it. He said, but don't quote me. You can say your doctor said it. Just don't say my name. He's since retired. But again, there's this fear too. That's an illegal vaccine. What are they doing giving it to black youth again? I mean, this is getting really weird. I mean, this is, and then where's the black leaders? Where are the Hispanic leaders as they're trying to give every girl in Mexico Gardasil that we know has been banned in all these countries and linked directly to sterilizing women and autoimmune disorders? Where are the Mexican flag waving Ford Foundation, you know, people that are beating up folks at Trump rallies? I mean, we really don't want you to kill your children. I mean, we really care about you. You're a human. Put down the Mexican flag for a minute and actually listen to us.
Well, I actually called the lawyer for the NAACP in DC, right? So I made him aware. He was aware. He was disturbed by it, but he wouldn't do anything about it. He wouldn't say anything.
Special place in hell.
Yeah, and he's probably not even one of the worst, because he's like, well,
no, I know, but terrible. They know, and then they're afraid. They're hurting children, folks.
They're afraid for real reason. You know, like, Andy Wakefield, who's brilliant and
fabulous.
My God, yeah. We can't say enough good things about that man. I mean, he's a true gentleman and Renaissance man. And
been proven right.
Yes, many times over, in fact. But, you know, they ruined his life. I mean, thank God he and his wife, they are amazing and go through life in a positive way. I don't know how they did it. I don't think I could do it with all the vilification that he's suffered. But, you know, look what happens. I mean, and worse things happen. I mean, we know that. I mean,
remember the Australian government? And there's nothing you don't seem to know. Remember when they had the vaccine maker and the internal email in the lawsuit say we need to start killing these people? The anti-vax folks?
Well, in Vioxx, when they got things through discovery, the internal emails at Merck for Vioxx was, we need to neutralize physicians. Here's the list of physicians that need to be neutralized, and you need to go to their homes if necessary.
Yeah, and then, strangely enough, some of them had been killed mysteriously. But hey, everybody commits suicide, folks. Nothing going on here. We'll be back. All I know is I'll be on vacation or I'll be on the street and I see folks that got an autistic son. I'll say, hey, is your son autistic? Oh, yes, he is. And I'll say, and most of the time they end up being listeners, but they'll say, yeah, he got shots when he was 18 months, the third round, had a convulsion in the car or they're at the hospital or that night, had a fever for 4 or 5 days and then never talked again. But they say there's no vaccine connection. Well, in the old days, like when my uncle took a tetanus shot and almost killed him, his whole body swelled up. The doctor said, no, it's a bad reaction to the tetanus shot. The insert says it. Now they're trying to say none of this exists. And I would just want to encourage Dr. Toni Bark, disease-reversal.com. You can check out the books, the films, the information there on her site, the news articles. It's excellent. I just want to ask her, in condensing all this, where we go from here. Because, she speaks to big groups of doctors and they're waking up. They see it. A lot of members of Congress have children or grandchildren that are fine at their house 1 week, the next week, brain damage, never talk again. They're not going to get away with this. They think they're just going to keep propagandizing it. And, why is breast cancer up a couple 1,000% in every Western country? They never ask why it's up. They say, find the cure. Well, we know it's glyphosates and other things. And the antibiotics, like she said, that turn off the immune system and kill our guts, just like the New York Times admitted a month ago. Wow, most cancer is communicable, and most of it passes through the gut. Everything Dr. Blaylock, a brain surgeon, said 25 years ago, what Wakefield said, we know. Turns out the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, well, since the 20s, the Rockefellers have been obsessed with gut flora. Turns out they were way ahead of the curve. Turns out there's some evil people. Doctor, in closing, other points for folks here. Just want to appreciate your work.
Thank you.
What other points you want to impart to people about what they should know?
Yeah. So, what I tell people after a large lecture, everyone's like, what can we do? And I think you have to start locally with your legislators because they truly don't know anything. So in Illinois, there's a JCAR committee. It's a joint commission. And it's Congress, it's the House, it's the House, it's the Senate, and it's right and it's left. And they vote on things like mandates, like rules for the Department of Public Health. You need to go, everyone needs to go to their rep and educate them because they're, okay. I mean, honestly, after doing this work politically, I can tell you that most legislators don't know much. Sorry, I have a potty mouth.
No, it's true. They are full of horse manure.
And they're spending all their time canvassing for money for their next election. That is their main concern.
Totally self-centered, narcissistic people that don't give a damn about anybody, including their own kids, are all committing suicide.
Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you that
I'm just saying, on average, a lot of these globalists are totally self-centered. They just could care less.
Well, so but we have to start locally because they're making the mandates at your state, right? You need to let them know you're not going to vote for them. You will get other people to vote in power if they don't really represent you. And you need to educate them because many of them are actually aghast when they find out. They don't know about the vaccine court. They don't know about the lack of liability. They don't know that there's a table of injuries that hasn't been updated since the vaccine court started and we added another 45 vaccines. They don't know any of this. And when they hear it, they actually become, they're shocked. So,
so that's the good news is the globalists are doing all this arrogantly. They're just forcing us to go out and be bigger activists and take our government back.
Absolutely. And, the more they push, the more we find out. I mean, Vaxxed would have never afforded this kind of a PR campaign. And I immediately, emailed Donna and Della. I was like, wow, you have gotten such free PR. This is brilliant. And I was
if the feds wouldn't have threatened the places where they were going to show it, if there hadn't been pressure put on Robert De Niro, it wouldn't have the Streisand effect.
Oh, yeah. It would have had like 150 people seeing it at Tribeca on the 24th, that Sunday afternoon. It would have been it. And in the meantime, man, it's gotten major exposure because methinks she doth protest too much, right? I mean, it piqued interest of people who had never even heard of this and would never have heard of it, except if they made it into a big deal.
Sure, it shows their arrogance. Doctor, do 5 more minutes with us. We got Roger Stone coming up on the latest with Trump and the campaign. He's got some of the biggest developments ever when he joins us the next hour. But 5 more minutes with this amazing lady. I'm Alex Jones. Our guest is with us another 5 minutes. Toni Bark, Dr. Toni Bark, disease-reversal.com. Highly recommended by Billy Corrigan. By the way, he was here live a few weeks ago with us in studio, did a taped interview with Leanne McAdoo. I want to promote that properly, so that's going to air next Wednesday during my show. It's about a 20-minute interview, very powerful. He said even more controversial stuff during that. And people say, oh, he's a rock star, who cares? He's a super smart guy who knows what he's talking about, has a great spirit, and has the courage to speak out. But let me tell you, I have other big movie stars and folks on here. You think Robert De Niro had him go after him, and the feds went after folks in Texas and high-level government officials not to show vaxxed? The stuff they do when you're in entertainment and you've sold 50 million records, the way they come after you is scary. And he's got the courage. So it's that courage I admire, not just the fact he's a smart guy and has great music. So finishing up with other solutions, Dr. Bark, get out there, get involved, force them to act like thugs. Don't be scared. We're fighting for children to not be brain damaged here.
Exactly. And we're fighting for children and for ourselves, for our lives, because remember, the vaccines are coming for you, for the adult. And if we just take this line down, that's going to happen. But I want to say that underneath, well, first of all, I want to say that Billy Corgan is incredibly brilliant. And I was going to use a different word than incredibly, but I can't say that on your show. But he is one of the most brilliant minds I know, and wickedly talented. Aside from that, though, let me tell you that underneath all vaccine injury and all chronic disease and all chronic pain syndromes is what I would call a dysautonomic syndrome. So the autonomic nervous system perceives itself to be an attack, and it can be an emotional attack, it can be a physical attack, but it can be this environmental chemical attack. And the body goes into protect itself, which is chronic sympathetic tone, fight and flight, all the time, and you can't heal in that tone. So the work that I did in my graduate school, in addition to looking at vaccines, was looking at first responders that are damaged, because we have first responders coming back from war. Over 30% of them are chronically damaged. And there's ways of reversing all chronic disease and damage, which is to deal with that excessive fight and flight and to get the autonomic nervous system working first and foremost.
And let's just say it, those of us that engage evil all the time take it on. I know I do. We kind of get PTSD. Absolutely. What are some of those techniques to get this stuff off of us, Doc?
Well, okay, so I use a handheld device that, oddly enough, was created in Russia in the Cosmonaut program about 35 years ago, and it measures electrical impedance. It's very scientific. It's actually approved in this country for, pain and injury. I'm using it off-label for many things, but I can measure impedance and see where along the sympathetic chain and acupuncture points there is still excessive sympathetic tone, and I can dialogue with an electrical frequency into the anterior hypothalamus to convince the anterior hypothalamus, which is the master control of everything in your body, that you're not. By
the way, but there's real science and there's kooks that misuse this, but I've got Dr. Nick Begich on with the thousands of government patents on this. That's a whole other subject. The globalists know about this, and they admit, even DARPA has been in major news, that they're, quote, testing waves to control us. So this stuff's going on.
Yeah, electrical frequency. So a body is electrical. We're electrical. The difference between something alive and dead is actually the electricity. The chemistry comes second. And so our whole system, autonomic nervous system, is electrical. It has to be addressed. Aside from visiting somebody who knows how to deal with these devices, acupuncture, electrical acupuncture, homeopathy, breath work, meditation, these things can help a lot. Well,
we are electrochemical, and I want to have you back about that. That is intriguing. I know about the Russian studies. Thank you so much. You're amazing. Disease-reversal.com. You're awesome, Dr. Bark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun. Loved it.
You bet. Incredible lady. All right, we got